Welcome to the Student Advice Service post-exam workshop for undergraduate students and certain other students who have failed, underperformed, or missed all or part of their exams due to mitigating circumstances or issues with the conduct of the examination. So let's start with what we mean by undergraduate students and certain other students. So this session is for all students who would come under the Exam Access and Mitigation Committee. And these would be students on the following courses: TRIPOS, EMBA, LLM, MASt, MBA, MCL, MEng, M.Fin, MMath, MMus, MSci, and PGCE. During this session, we'll be providing you with lots of information. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us via email or phone. The details are provided in the video description. So what are the objectives of this session? Well, we hope by the end of the session, you'll be able to explain the meaning of mitigating circumstances and give examples. We also hope you'll be able to explain the meaning of issues with the conduct of the examination, that you'll get a sense as to whether you have experienced either of the above issues, that you'll be able to establish whether you may have a case to present, that you'll be able to name different possible outcomes of a successful application, that you'll be able to explain how the application process works, and that you'll be able to recognize the procedure that's relevant to your own personal situation. We also hope that you'll be able to determine what type of evidence is required to support your application, and that you'll get a sense of what information your application should contain. And then finally, that you'll be able to identify where you can get further support. Just a brief introduction to the advice service. We're here for all Cambridge students, undergraduate and postgraduate students from all 31 colleges. And all the support we provide is confidential, and we can provide support on any issues impacting students. But as you can see from this video, exam-related issues are one of the main areas of advice for the advice service.
So what can you do if you failed, underperformed, or did not attend your exam? The first thing is to determine why this happened. Did you fail, underperform, or not attend the exam due to mitigating circumstances? These include medical reasons, grave cause, technical difficulties, or other disruptions caused by COVID-19, such as caring responsibilities. Or was it something to do with the conduct of the examination itself? So what is a mitigating circumstance? A mitigating circumstance relates to medical reasons or grave cause. For example, an example of medical reasons includes if a student's exams were affected by a physical or mental health issue. And for grave cause, if a student's exams were affected by something that was unanticipated or completely beyond their control, such as the death of a parent or a serious family emergency or another issue related to COVID-19. If you have mitigating circumstances that did affect your preparation, performance, or virtual attendance, what will happen? So during this particular assessment period, the university has adopted a safety net for final year undergraduate students. What this means is that as long as a final year undergraduate passes their assessments, either in the first or second assessment period, depending on their circumstances, they will not receive a class lower than the class they were awarded in their second year exams. Therefore, the university will only confirm the class awarded in your second year or improve on it. If you are not classed in your second year, the safety net will not automatically apply with reference to your first year results. If you take your assessments either in the first or second assessment period, and your final year classification is lower than your first year's, you, via your college, can apply to the Exam Access and Mitigation Committee, so the EAMC, for a review. If the application of the safety net is not satisfactory for your situation, what can you do? So in normal circumstances or issues unrelated to COVID-19, the first thing I will ask a student is if the situation in this situation is, did you get any help? So did you see your GP, your college nurse, a counsellor, or other healthcare professional? If it was an issue of grave cause, what evidence can you collect to prove this, and did you let your college know? We ask these questions because students via their college can present their case to the Exam Access and Mitigation Committee and make the university aware of their circumstances by laying out exactly what happened and, if possible, providing evidence to support this. Due to COVID-19, you may not be able to obtain evidence. As such, in some cases, you may be able to self-certify your mitigating circumstances, grave cause, caring responsibilities, or similar disruptions. How would your case be presented? So in usual circumstances, presenting a case that relates to exam and mitigating circumstances is called applying for an examination allowance. However, due to the coronavirus pandemic, the university has had to adapt and change its approach to undertaking assessments. As such, the university recognises other mitigating circumstances may also apply. These could include caring responsibilities, access to internet connection, or quiet working space, or you may experience technical difficulties during your assessment. If your mitigating circumstances relate to COVID-19, you should let your college tutor know as soon as possible. A result of the university's adaptation to assessments has been to set summative or formative assessments depending on a student's course and year of study. If you were due to take timed summative assessments in the Easter term, but were unable to sit all or part of your exams, you will have the opportunity to take these exams in the second assessment period. The second assessment period will be held over 3 weeks between the 7th and 25th of September, and the university has stated the timetables for these assessments will be issued in August. If you are unable to take your summative assessments in either assessment period, you will need to make an application to the Exam Access and Mitigation Committee for an examination allowance. During this period, the university has stated that students who are undertaking summative assessments will be permitted to self-certify illness, caring commitments, and similar disruptions. If you're a student undertaking formative assessments and experience mitigating circumstances or other grave cause during your assessments, you will be able to progress on to the next year of study without an allowance being required, irrespective of the outcome of the assessment. So what could be the possible outcomes of a successful application for an examination allowance? So if you have a case and evidence to support that case, there are a range of possible examination allowances. Your tutor and the student advice service can provide information and guidance on these. So depending on the examination allowance, outcomes could include that you're allowed to progress, so you're allowed to progress to the following year of your study. For students who are not doing honours examinations, such as MBA students or MASt students, they may be allowed the examination. There's also the option to receive DDH and graduate with DDH, and that's declared to have deserved honours. Or you could graduate with an ordinary BA degree. If a mitigating circumstance affected only a small part of the examination, it may be possible to have that or those affected papers disregarded. This would be via requesting a reconsideration of the original result. So what kind of evidence is required? Usually you need to be able to provide medical evidence or evidence of grave cause. For students impacted by COVID-19 and who are undertaking summative assessments, you will be permitted to self-certify illness, caring commitments, and similar disruptions. In terms of medical evidence, this would be a letter from a healthcare professional, GP, college nurse, counsellor, confirming that you were unwell before and or during the examination and explaining the impact the health issue has had on your performance or attendance. Medical support should be sought before the completion of the examination, as post hoc evidence will not be given the same weight as evidence which predates an examination. Due to COVID-19, not everyone will be able to have access to a healthcare professional, so being able to you are still able to self-certify during this period. In terms of evidence of grave cause, this could include, for example, a death certificate of a parent or medical evidence proving that a loved one has been hospitalized. This is not always necessary to provide, but check with your tutor if they require this evidence for your application. Academic evidence also needs to be provided to demonstrate that you are expected to achieve honours or other standard required to pass the examinations. This evidence also needs to corroborate that you have underperformed as compared to what you expected to. This academic evidence usually comes in the form of supervision reports. A supportive letter from your supervisor or director of studies may also be helpful. In other words, if you are not expected to pass your exams, Even if you were affected by mitigating circumstances during the examination period, it is unlikely an examination allowance would be granted. However, if you have evidence that mitigating circumstances affected you throughout the year, intermission may also be an option worth exploring. Are there any deadlines for making applications for allowances? So applications for allowances should be made as soon as possible and no later than 3 months from the deadline of publication of the outcome of the examination. Applications received after this date will not normally be considered. If you have failed or not attended your exams, you may not be able to continue with your studies until an examination allowance has been granted. In most cases, it's best to apply as soon as possible.
So we've heard a lot about mitigating circumstances. Now, what about if there are issues with the conduct of the examination? So some issues with the conduct of the examination can be raised informally. For example, if there was a mistake on the paper or a question that hasn't been covered in your subject area that affected your performance. There's a form entitled Representation to the Examiner that can be submitted within 5 days of the examination. And what this does is it allows the issue to be reported to the chair of examiners and considered by the examiners at their final meeting. Issues such as the ones I just mentioned, as well as other issues with the conduct of the examination, can also be presented after the 5 days, but they have to be presented within 28 days of the examination results becoming available. These issues can be raised via the examination review procedure. Students can request a reconsideration of their results themselves, but they may wish to seek advice from their tutor or from the Student Advice Service. So we talked about examples such as mistakes on the paper or perhaps a question that hasn't been covered in your subject area. But are there any other issues students can raise regarding the conduct of their examination? Well, the answer is yes. The issues we've already talked about would come under a procedural irregularity in the examination process. And the full grounds include the procedural irregularity that we've talked about, but they also include demonstrable bias or the perception of bias within the examination process. And finally, the withdrawal of academic provision which has had a demonstrable impact on the examination itself, of which the examining board were not aware. So what exactly is a procedural irregularity and what would the evidence look like? So this could be, for example, if during an examination there was a mistake on the paper that affected your performance. So an example of evidence could be a letter or some kind of communication confirming there was a mistake on the paper. What is demonstrable bias or perception of bias within the examination process, and what would evidence look like in that instance? So for example, do you have reason to believe your paper was not marked anonymously and that the examiner marking the paper may have been biased toward you? Examples of evidence could be examiners' written comments that could be interpreted as biased, or behavior of an examiner during a viva or other oral presentation. For example, if you were on the borderline for a class. What is withdrawal of academic provision and what would the evidence look like? For example, during periods of industrial action, if a student feels they were examined on material that was not covered due to the industrial action. Examples of evidence could be dates of the industrial action and the academic provision that was not received as a result of this. Another example could be a summary of what material was or was not covered during the industrial action. And finally, evidence of action or lack thereof taken by the department to compensate for the withdrawal of the academic provision in respect to the impact on your assessment outcome. These examples may apply to some students during the COVID-19 outbreak as well. So what would be possible outcomes of a successful application for an examination review? Uphold the candidate's request for where at least one of the grounds has been met, and either referring back to the examining body for reconsideration in accordance with the examining body's written rules and guidance, or require the examining body to re-examine the candidate in conditions considered appropriate to the examination review officer, including to require the examiners to examine or re-examine the candidate, to require new examiners to re-examine the candidate, to permit the candidate to submit a revised dissertation or other assessment, to require one or more additional examiners to make an independent report or reports on the work submitted by the candidate, and then finally, to require the examining body to set the candidate new examination papers or other assessments. What would happen in a situation where you feel that your work deserved a higher result? Well, in most cases, that would come under academic judgment, and neither the examination review procedure nor any other formal procedure can be used for academic judgment.
So whether your case relates to mitigating circumstances or examination review, what can you do if you don't have evidence to support your case? So if medical issues affected your exams and you did not seek medical support at the time, post hoc evidence is better than no evidence. Explain the situation to your healthcare professional, so how you were feeling and when and what impact this had on your exams, and ask them to write a letter summarizing what you have told them. During COVID-19, the threshold for providing evidence has been lowered, and you may be able to self-certify illness. Some individuals have been able to access their GP via virtual means, and in these cases, having a medical letter could help to support your case further. In cases of evidence of grave cause, you may not need to provide external evidence of grave cause. However, it is advisable to let your college know as soon as possible. Usually a supportive letter from your college confirming the grave cause, including cases where there is increased caring responsibilities, will be sufficient for an application. If you need additional evidence relating to illness or death of a family member to support grave cause, you could consider speaking to a healthcare professional about what impact this had on your exams. For academic evidence, most undergraduate students will have supervision reports, but some postgraduate students may not. Consider asking supervisors or other academics you work with to provide letters of support. You can also use emails you may have received from these individuals about the quality of your work. So where can I go for more information and support? You should definitely consider speaking to your tutor about any of the matters discussed, whether it relates to mitigating circumstances that affected your examination or issues with the conduct of the examination. If your examination results are not as you expected and there are no mitigating circumstances, you should also consider speaking to your director of studies or supervisor to check that the scoring has been added up correctly, and if it has, to see what you can learn for next time. You may also wish to get advice from the Student Advice Service. You may also wish to access university guidance yourself, the links of which can be found in the video description. The key guidance and procedures for mitigating circumstances are found in the applications for examinations, allowances, notes for guidance for staff and students. And the key guidance for matters relating to the conduct of the examination can be found in the examination review procedure.
So what happens if your application is unsuccessful? Well, if you're unsatisfied with the outcome and the reasons behind the decision, you can request a review of the decision on the following grounds: procedural irregularities that occurred during the reconsideration, which were material or potentially material to the decision being reached. The decision is unreasonable in that no other reasonable person or body could have reached the same decision on the available evidence. The availability of new evidence which materially impacts a decision and which, for valid reasons, could not have been submitted at an earlier stage. The deadline to request a review of the decision is 14 days from the formal decision being issued. And then what happens if you're unsatisfied with the outcome of the review of the decision? Well, in those cases, you can make a representation to the Office of the Independent Adjudicator, the OIA. To do this, you'll need a completion of procedures letter from the university. The OIA is an independent body that will consider whether the university followed its procedures in considering your case and whether the procedures are fair. The deadline for this is 1 year of the formal decision being issued. Finally, let's briefly talk about how you can access advice from the Student Advice Service. So you can email or phone to make an appointment to see an advisor. Currently, appointments are conducted by phone or video call. You can also check the Student Advice Service website and the union's bulletins to see whether we are holding any of our exam-related workshops. We're also happy to communicate with you by email only if that is what you prefer. We very much hope this session has been helpful, and please don't hesitate to get in touch with the Student Advice Service if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.